kids! Welcome to Bible Discovery. Looks a little different this week, but I hope we can still have fun. Hopefully we can get together at the church again soon, but for now, we're just thankful that we can still find a way to do Bible Discovery with you. This week we're talking about Jesus calling his disciples. In those days, only the best students went to their teachers and asked to follow them. The students watched their teachers very carefully and tried to be just like the teachers. And teachers didn't allow just anyone to follow them. You had to be a very hard worker, and the teacher had to think you were pretty special too. Let's watch a video and see how Jesus chose his disciples.
Jesus' ministry had begun. He traveled around preaching about God and telling people to turn away from their sins. People started talking about Jesus and the things he was teaching. They were interested in what Jesus had to say. Large crowds followed Jesus around and listened to him teach. One day, Jesus was walking along the Sea of Galilee. He saw two brothers, Simon, who was called Peter, and Andrew. Peter and Andrew were fishermen. Jesus called out to them, "Follow me, and I will teach you to fish for people." Right away, Peter and Andrew dropped their nets and followed Jesus. Later, he saw two more brothers. Their names were James and John. They were in a boat, fixing nets with their father, Zebedee. Jesus called out to them, and right away they got up, left their father and the boat, and followed Jesus. Jesus went on and saw a man named Matthew, who was also called Levi. Matthew was sitting at the tax office. Matthew was a tax collector. Many people didn't like tax collectors because tax collectors were unfair. Jesus called out to him, "Follow me." So Matthew got up, left everything behind, and followed Jesus. Matthew had a big feast for Jesus at his house. Many tax collectors and sinners came to eat with Jesus and his disciples. The religious leaders saw this, and they didn't think Jesus should be friends with people who did wrong things. They complained to the disciples, "Why does your teacher eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" Jesus heard the religious leaders and said, "People who are healthy don't need a doctor, but people who are sick do. I did not come to invite good people. I came to invite sinners to turn back to God." Later, Jesus gathered his followers together and chose 12 of them to be his disciples. Jesus' apostles would work closely with Jesus and would go out to tell others about him. These are the men Jesus chose: Simon, who was called Peter, Simon's brother Andrew, James and John, who were called the sons of thunder, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James and the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot. Jesus came to earth to show what God is like and to save people from their sins. This is great news. Jesus told his disciples to tell others about him, and we are Jesus' disciples when we trust in him. Everyone in the world needs to hear the good news about Jesus.
Hey there, I'm Pastor Brian, and it's time for Questions from Kids. Anna Lee from Clinton, Mississippi asks,
how do we know if we are going to like God's plan?
all right, Anna, you might not like my answer because my answer might not be what you would expect. You are probably sitting there thinking, all right, Pastor Brian's going to give us this great explanation about how we're always going to like God's plan and it'll be really warm and fuzzy. Well, that's not the answer I can give. The answer I need to give is we don't know if we're always going to like God's plan, because God's plan sometimes includes for us to go through suffering and hard things. We know this is true because think about God's plan for Jesus, his own son. God's plan for Jesus was that Jesus would suffer and die for the sins of the world. And so if God would have his own son go through that plan of difficulty and hardship, why do we think God would spare us from hard things? We're not promised that. And so while there are some times where God's plan for us is very pleasant, and we, appreciate that, there are times that God's plan for us includes difficult things, and we're just not going to like it. But here's the key. It's not about what we like, it's about what we trust, and it's about who we trust. You see, whatever God's plan is for us, we need to learn to trust that God is at work no matter what for His glory and our good. That God will be glorified through anything, and that we can find that it is for our good as well, even if we don't see it on this earth. Now, one day in heaven, I believe we're going to look back and God will show us why we went through what we went through, and we're going to say, oh, now it makes sense. But that may not happen on earth. And so the key for us, again, is not necessarily to want to like God's plan, but to want to trust His plan no matter what. That's what faith is all about. So I've got a question back for you. Is it easy or hard for you to trust God's plan for you, and why?
So, do any of you have plans for your future? Maybe you want to be a pilot or a doctor or a mom or travel the world or, I don't know, there's lots of choices, right? But what if your plans aren't the same as God's plans? Is it easy or hard for you to trust God's plans for you? How come? Take some time to talk about this with your family. I also have a couple of activities that you can do at home this week. The first, you've probably played it before. Follow the leader. So take turns being the leader. Everyone in your family. Now, is it always easy to do everything that the leader is doing? Are some leaders harder to follow than others? Why? Here's another activity to try. You'll have to have your parents on board with this one. The next time you go for a drive in your car, or your van, or whatever your family drives, see if you can give directions to your parents to get where you're going. Do you think it's easy for them to follow your directions? Do you think it's easy for them to trust you? You parents might want to answer these questions too. We're going to finish off here with a song video. It's a verse from John. See if you can memorize it this week. Have a good week. See you later.
John 4:23. But the time is coming, the time is coming, the time is coming. It is already here.